Hi, folks. I'm Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening for the Monsu Caulfield program for club committee members. This is the first one, how to leverage your employability skills development while being a committee member. I actually started my career many years ago working for Monsu Caulfield. So Monsu Caulfield does have a very special place in my heart. So I'm very pleased to be with you this evening. Organisations That Matter has been around for 15 years. I work in the high performance space, do a lot of coaching for executives, high performance teams, high performance cultures, those sorts of things. Got a very wide range of some pretty big clients, including Metro Trains, Nutrien Ag Solutions Australia, many of the big city councils, not just here in Victoria, all of the major universities in Victoria, including, of course, Monash University. So in addition to Monsu Caulfield, I do a lot of work with Monash University. And there's a whole bunch of organisations you can easily see at the organisation's website at orgsthatmatter.com. And again, I'm looking forward to being able to run this session for you this evening. And there we go. I've also been very fortunate to recently publish a #1 Amazon Kindle bestseller. It's called Disruption Leadership Matters, Lessons for Leaders from the Pandemic. It was published in December of 2021 and covered 20 months of the period throughout the pandemic. And it's got a whole range of case studies and examples from a wide range of global organisations down to quite small organisations that are based here in Australia. Some of the global organisations are not necessarily in Australia, but certainly the small organisations were, where we really focused on how people have led throughout the pandemic and treated the people in their organisation as human beings and not as human resources. For those of you involved with the club committee program through Monsu Caulfield, if you want to get the book through my website, you get $5 off and an upgrade to Express Post. You just select standard shipping and the Express Post confirmation would come through when you get your tracking information through Australia Post. It's also available, of course, at Amazon Kindle because that's where it's a bestseller. Also Audible, iBooks through Apple, of course, and all other good online stores. So that'll be the last I'll mention about that for you. But if you're interested in that, you can seek that information there. And again, I'm very fortunate to have a bestseller under my belt. So what we're going to focus on this evening is the brief welcome and introduction. We'll do a deep dive into each of the big 9 employability skills. And we want you to be able to relate this to your role on your committee. An opportunity for you to identify some stories for potential use in future interviews. For some of you, that might not be too far away, and I'm happy for you to let me know in the chat function. How far away do you think you will be starting the process of going for jobs? So it might be graduate positions you might be starting to apply for. If that's the case, that could be happening even around now or at towards the later part of the year. So feel free to let me know, or just unmute yourself and let me know when you think you might be starting to go through the process of going for jobs to get your career going. We've got in a couple of months' time from Kerry. Thank you, much appreciated that. So this is going to be really relevant for you, Kerry, and really help you with your preparation. And we'll talk about the next session, which is on tomorrow evening, as a matter of fact. So the big picture for the big 9 employability skills is that your academic performance does matter. Now, for some folks, maybe your academic performance at a period of time wasn't that great. And it's like, oh gosh, you know, I'm in trouble when I see what Gary's presenting here now. If you are someone where your academic performance wasn't great for some of the time, but has improved recently and is gotten better over the last period, then focus on that potentially in an interview. That's actually potentially a good story to tell, that yeah, I might not have been so focused, and at some point I got a wake-up call, but since whatever the time frame is to now, this is who you will get if you employ me, not that person back there. So you can turn it into a really constructive and positive story if your grades have improved across the journey. Again, feel free to let me know if that's relevant for you. So we want to have academic performance, if we can, to be as good as possible. Again, if it's more recent, so if more recent means the rest of this year for you, then that's absolutely fine. That will be a great story to be able to tell and share, because that's the person they're going to get when they potentially hire you down the track. What they also want is the evidence of your understanding and application of the big 9 employability skills, which will share specifically what they mean. These are globally recognized skills. So these are recognized everywhere throughout the world as being important transferable skills. And that's why your role in a club committee provides you with transferable skills into your career. So you want them. You also need to be able to tell your story. So it's a bit hard to do that if you don't know what they are. So this is a critical aspect, and while we'll spend some time on that this evening. And it's these three in their collective that gives you more choices when you graduate. You can go from literally having no job opportunities coming your way to multiple job opportunities. And many students that I've had the pleasure to work with over time have ended up with 3, 4, 5, 6 job offers coming through by being able to put this all together. So there's some really big benefits for you should you do this, and really to leverage the time that you're investing in your club. And no doubt you do it because of the social reasons, your passion, etc. But at the same time, why not get this increased capability of getting more choices for your job down the track as a result of the work that you've been putting into your club and society? So all 9 employability skills are interdependent. Now, the first one is on communication. No surprise, but what does that mean? That's what we're going to help you focus with today. So feel free at any time to unmute yourself and ask a question for clarification regarding anything I say about these big 9 employability skills when I explain what they are, or please feel free to use the chat function to do the same thing. So you need to be able to speak at a conversational level in the language of the country in which you are living. Obviously in Australia, that language is English, but it varies obviously depending on the main country. So your ability to be conversational in that language increases your ability to be able to be seen as an effective communicator. No surprises. Public speaking is something that people are a little bit surprised about, but it's not necessarily public speaking like I'm doing right now. In many instances, you might be in a team of 10 people or 20 people, or you might be in a department of 150 people or even more. And while they might not all be co-located, as is the case in many of the larger organizations, people are spread across different time zones and different locations, etc. You're still clearly going to meet online, just like you do for your university studies, or certainly have done so over the past 2 years. But when the manager, the director, the person who's in charge, whatever title they might have, turns to you and says, "What do you think?" you need to be able to answer effectively. Now, it's a form of public speaking. If you haven't ever done any work on your public speaking, you might not perform as well as you could because you're worried about everyone hearing your voice or looking at you, or whatever the case may be. So it's being able to have a clear, simple message, no matter what type of environment you might be. Now, this is where your presentations that you do at university are so useful for you, because you are getting to practice consistently your public speaking in a more formal sense, okay? So it is considered one of the communication skills. Appropriate written communication for the channel that you're using. So what we're using right now is a channel through Zoom. And if you're using a telephone or a mobile phone, that's a channel. If you're talking in person, that's a channel. If you're using a whiteboard, that's a channel. Or if you're using another online tool such as Teams, or it might be a Miro board or something like that, could be Dropbox. They're various communication channels. Obviously using Snapchat and all those sorts of apps are various channels again. So it's about understanding what's the appropriate way to write depending on the channel that I'm doing for the written based type channels. So as you can see on the presentation, it's understanding that in an email, for example, you should write out the word you, Y-O-U, rather than use the letter U that you might use in a more informal context or an informal channel. So it's about understanding that. Now, unfortunately, folks, I have seen final year students, I have seen research graduates with PhDs in the cover letter that they have to email, in the email, use text language when they're sending the email, and then wonder why they don't hear back from the prospective employer, because that just says you don't know how to communicate effectively for that type of a channel, okay? So understanding this is really critical. Being and comprehending what you were told. Now, what does that really mean? What does it mean to comprehend what you were being told, and how would you know? Any thoughts? How would you know if you were comprehending what you've been told? Any thoughts, Kerry?
In what context was this in again?
So this is in relation to the communication employability skill. So this is part of the definition of what this skill actually is. So globally, it's recognized as a skill. Part of it is about your comprehension. So fundamentally, what does that really mean? And if you're not sure, that's fine. You can say, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine, you know. So what it really means is that you might be given some written instructions and you are able to understand what they are and follow those instructions. So that's comprehending. Or you might be given some verbal instructions and you're able to comprehend and follow them. Or if you're not sure, you're able to say, I'm not sure what that means. Could you explain it again, please? Or maybe explain it in a different way. So it's the willingness to actually be vulnerable and open when you don't understand something, to be able to say, hey, I don't understand, rather than pretending you understand when you don't. So comprehension is a really key part of understanding what communication means from an employability skill perspective. And certainly from a club perspective, what you want to be doing, and I think the pandemic has helped with this, is that what we know is that when you've got an important message that you want to communicate to your prospective audience, is you want to use a minimum of 3 different channels, 3 different forms of getting the same message across. So think about with your club committee meetings, for example, how we're sharing the information from those meetings, or even within the meetings, to use more than one channel to get the important information across. So for example, we've got the channel tonight of the live session. We'll have the channel of the YouTube private channel that I'll be setting up as a playlist for this audience to be able to watch afterwards. And you've also got the presentation will be available to you through a Miro board that I will share at the end of the session, okay, that you can download. So there's an example of 3 different ways we'll be sharing this content for you to be able to visit after the session. So when you think of your club committees, think about what are the opportunities that I've already had. So we may have already had some functions and social events this year, or there might be some other activities that the club's doing. What have been some opportunities where you've personally been able to put these communication skills into practice? So to take some personal notes and think about them, because we're going to leverage them a little bit later on when we get to storytelling. Creativity and innovation is the second of the big 9 employability skills. Most folk are fairly okay with what creativity means. It means that we are able to come up with something new. What they get a little bit stuck on is innovation, because most folk believe that there's only one form of innovation, when in fact there's 2. It's the first form of innovation that most people believe is the only form of innovation, and that's called disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation is like the swipe function that Apple created on our phones back in the early 2000s. It's completely changed the way that people used phones at that point. In fact, people were still using phones for 85% phone calls at the time that Apple beat Samsung for that functionality. So that functionality of the swipe was a first for the entire world. It hadn't happened anywhere else. And certainly it's been applied to so many devices ever since. It's been copycatted, et cetera, et cetera. That's what normally happens with a disruptive innovation. But a disruptive innovation is like creates a step change. Things change dramatically very, very quickly. And certainly the way we communicated with phones, the way business has happened, the way education has happened, the explosion of apps as a result of that single disruption in the first place has created multiple other various disruptions for so many different industries. I mean, could you imagine Airbnb existing if you couldn't use this? Could you imagine Uber existing if you couldn't use that swipe functionality and all the apps that have all come with it along the way? So the probability of you being involved with a disruptive innovation through your club is probably pretty small, okay? So this is where the second of the innovation types becomes extremely important, and that is incremental innovation. So an incremental innovation is when you take something that already exists somewhere in the world. Maybe it is an app. Maybe it is a way of communicating with your membership. Maybe it is a new way of actually holding your meetings with your peers on the committee. Whatever it might be, it already exists somewhere else in the world, but it doesn't exist within your club, or it doesn't exist within your context. If you introduce it to your context and it works and it's helpful and it makes things better, easier, more effective, more efficient, for example, you get those outcomes, then you have contributed to an incremental innovation. Now, I can promise you that there isn't a single employer that I work with in the corporate world, in the government sector, etc., that isn't looking for new employees that are innovative, that can innovate. You will see that language regularly in the advertisements for folk when they're looking for you to apply for roles. So if you can talk about where you've been an innovator, where you've contributed to introducing something. Now, it's okay if your incremental innovation wasn't just you, if there was a team of you that introduced it to the broader committee and club, for example, that's absolutely fine. You still can claim your contribution as a team member to an incremental innovation. So I just want to check if you're comfortable with your understanding. So either with the chat function there, or feel free to unmute yourself, that makes sense, because there's a very important difference in the understanding between a disruptive innovation and incremental one. And it is the incremental type where you're most likely to be able to be cool. Okay, we're all good there. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to the third one, and that's initiative and enterprise. So initiative and enterprise is both seeing the opportunities to be helpful and taking action that actually is helpful. So it's seeing an opportunity to be helpful and then acting it out and bringing it to life. So if you see something that could be helpful, but you don't do anything, that's not this employability skill. That's real effectively doesn't add up to anything. So, and often initiative and enterprise are simple little things. It might be at a club function where something's not quite going right, and you can see that it's not going right. You can see what needs to be get done, and you just go and do it. And it is helpful, and it sort of resolves whatever was going on. Now, as we'll see with the interdependency of these employability skills, that could also be seen as a form of problem solving as well. Often they work hand in glove, the initiative in enterprise and problem solving perspectives. So it's about taking action that is helpful, and it's without being asked to do so. So you don't have to go seek permission. You just know this is the right thing to do, and you get up and do it. Now, the key word here is helpful. If you see something and you take action and it's actually not helpful, it's probably being a pain in the neck rather than being initiative and enterprise, okay? So it is that helpful part of the definition is absolutely essential. So think about opportunities to show initiative in your club. And often it's going to relate to reaching out and helping other committee members that you can see for whatever reason are struggling and need a hand. And this is also a great way to build fantastic teamwork skills and great stories, okay? Sometimes you just sense through your gut that someone's struggling, and you reach out and you say, hey, how are you going? Not wanting to interfere, but, you know, I noticed, you know, it seems like you might be a little bit stuck. Would you like a hand? And would you like a hand specifically in this way? Where you might be able to contribute. So think about that, and think about things the club might be trying to do right now that might offer the opportunity to put into practice this skill. Intercultural competence is pretty straightforward. It's effectively what it means, and it's about understanding that every culture operates by a specific set of behavioral rules at a very high level. And then as you go into different parts of the country and different aspects, you've got your subcultures within that country that are sort of broadly in alignment with the larger country's culture. But it's about understanding that these behavioral rules exist. And of course, when you are operating or working or traveling or having some time in another country, being aware of these different rules and behaving according to them is really, really important. And so if we flip that around, though, and this is one of the great opportunities of being at Monash University with so many cultures present, is that you can open your mind to the fact that, hey, the other folk from other countries that I might be working with and doing things with, they might see this thing that we're doing from a different perspective, and just engaging in the conversation, saying, hey, you've seen how we're doing it here in Australia. How might you do that in your country? And that'll broaden your understanding. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing with the behavioral rules either. It's about understanding and broadening your exposure to what the different behavioral contexts might be. So it might be, oh gosh, if we were to run an event like this event we're trying to do here, or we're going to do, or are doing here in Australia, how would that work in your country, or would it not work? How would you have to modify it? And broadening your mind in that way. And, you know, again, prospective employers, because of the importance of diversity and inclusion, and if you're not aware, it's extremely important. It's probably got the most focus it's ever had in our workplaces ever right now, and that's appropriate. It's absolutely appropriate. We've probably been too slow, to be brutally honest. So the more you can demonstrate that you were able to do this at university, the better it's going to be. So is there any examples where intercultural competencies are being present, or you've got the opportunity within your clubs? Again, feel free to either use the chat function or to unmute yourself. I'll just check if we've got anyone in the waiting room as well. Okay. So working along international students within the community is a great opportunity, and being able to take that to the next step of actually asking that question about how would this work for you back home? It's as simple as that. And, you know, again, that could be a really powerful story. The fact that you asked that question and the conversation that would get catalyzed from it, it might only last for a few minutes. And that's the beauty of these skills. They don't have to take a lot of time, or sometimes they don't even have to take a lot of effort. They just take a little bit of effort, and then that could create a really powerful story for you to be able to demonstrate to a prospective employer that you understand what the skill is. Planning an organization, that's your ability to create and execute plans, from everything from a strategic plan for your club right through to daily checklists and everything in between. And obviously, if you're hosting events and those sorts of things, the way that you plan and lead up to it, and understanding that planning is dynamic, so that they can constantly change. But, you know, you've got your plan in place, and without it, you wouldn't know how to make corrections along the way, which is where that dynamic nature of planning kicks in. A lot of your planning in clubs might be just in your heads, but if you're actually a bit more sophisticated and you're using some tools to help you communicate, so again, that's the interdependency with communication and your planning. If you've got some of that more high-level sophistication, you might even have some planning tool that you use. That again could be a really powerful story for you to be able to demonstrate you've done some real world planning that creates real world activities and events with real world outcomes that you're using to measure the success of those activities and events. That could just be through the number of people participating. It could be through the qualitative feedback you get from the participants that were saying how great it was, those sorts of things. It doesn't just have to be number based, of course, okay? Now, time management is considered to be a really important aspect of your planning and organisation skill. So you won't find time management on its own because it's embedded in this skill. So it's things like being able to turn up on time. That's important. And just as a general rule for online activities, I'd encourage you to turn up 5 minutes earlier, because there might be some technology challenges. There might be some new apps that you might get exposed to, that if you get in the room that little bit earlier, if you can, through your own schedule, it's a really great example of you being really prepared from a time management point of view. But it's also about being able to deliver projects on time, be able to create deliverables on time, whatever that might be. So this could relate to your consistency with your timeliness with regards to your academic studies and getting your assignments in on time. And maybe you have a habit where you actually get them in earlier than you have to, for example. That might be an interesting story to share. That would be a bit different because most people don't do that, right? They wait for the very last minute instead of actually being a bit more proactive with it. And if you've got a reason for it, as to why you might do that. It might be that you got 3 or 4 assignments lined up at the same time. So you just went, hey, I'm going to get the first 2 out. They're a bit easier for me. I'm going to actually hand them in 2 days earlier so I can 100% focus on the last 2. That might be a bit more challenging. That's a great time management story that you could be sharing that relates just to your studies. Then, of course, with your committee role, it's your time management with meetings and being able to participate in them, turning up on time and all of those things. Your delivery of whatever actions that come out of those meetings that are specific to you, that's about your time management. And of course, at a bigger scale or a larger scale is when you've actually got your events and functions and things like that that you're contributing to, and they happen on time. They're like clockwork based on how your planning went. And then you get the great result that you're after. Again, that's a whole end-to-end story around your planning and organization and your time management. And of course, clubs have many, many examples that relate around planning and organization, including when you get toward the end of this year, thinking about what the committee is going to look like for next year, especially if you're not going to be there. Thinking about that legacy, thinking about how do we continue to make sure that we've got good people coming in to fill roles next time around, and what role you went into being able to secure folk to be able to maybe step into your role, for example, and how you maybe even started preparing and nurturing them for the following year, even though you're not going to be there. Again, really, really powerful stories that show that you're much more of a big picture thinker than just what's in front of me right now. Now, some of the examples I'll be throwing out won't necessarily be things that you will have thought of before. And that's why I'm really encouraging you to take notes down so that you can actually go, okay, I hadn't thought about that. I've still got the rest of this year to potentially put that into practice. So I've got some great stories when it comes to your turn to be going for your job interviews. Problem solving and problem identifying and solution is number 6. And that's everything from big problems as to how to engage effectively with club members and how to recruit club members through these COVID times that we've had, to working out how to solve a technology problem because your AirPods didn't work when you tried to set them up for the Zoom session this evening or tomorrow, whatever the case might be, and all the problems in between. Okay, so all of them are valid. And what you want to be able to have is access over time to some scales of different problems that you've had to deal with. But again, understanding that some of the simple little technology problem solving that you do and you don't even realize you're doing it is still problem solving and therefore is valid. What you find with problem solving is it always involves action, which is why it can combine very closely with your initiative and enterprise skill that we mentioned earlier. It includes lessons learned. So you can have a problem-solving story where maybe you did something wrong to start with. You didn't actually do it correctly, but you learned from that. You went and discovered something you need to discover. And then the second cycle of doing it, maybe it was to do with public speaking. You didn't go so well the first time. And then you actually went and sought out some techniques to improve your public speaking so that the next time you were much more effective with your public speaking. That's a form of problem solving too, but shows your willingness to improve over time. Really powerful story to demonstrate a willingness to improve, a willingness to be vulnerable and share, hey, I got something wrong, but when I got it wrong, this is what I did. I took action, I learned something, I was then able to put that learning into action and I got better results. They are really, really powerful stories, which we'll again highlight soon. Professionalism. Any thoughts on that word? What on earth does it mean? Any thoughts? What does it mean, professionalism, or to be professional? Given there's so many different industries you folk are going to end up working in, what on earth could it possibly mean? So being able to work in a professional environment, being able to work in a group, says Kerry, thank you. Great start. That's absolutely both of them. And part of the professional environment is it might be a corporate environment, it might be in the healthcare system, it could be in the arts industry. So it could be at the National Gallery of Victoria, for example. It could be in the performing arts as well. One of my children, I've got 5 children, and my middle child's at an elite performing arts school himself and right throughout the school holidays, despite doing year 12, is actually doing some work on a play that he's acting in. And so It could be being able to understand, well, what does it mean to be professional in that environment? Well, it's absolutely time management, turn up on time. You cannot turn up late for the directors and those sorts of things. It's being able to be able to really take feedback on and then go and do the work, often in your breaks, to improve. Some people think professional means wearing a suit. Now, to be brutally honest, in my work over time, over many years, I've seen the behavior of too many people, in fact, wearing a suit that is absolutely inappropriate and not professional. So wearing a suit that is not a sign of what being a professional is. It may be part of the culture in some places that, yes, absolutely, you should wear a suit when you're in the office, and that's part of what it means to look professional in that environment. But it's more about your behavior and what you do. Now, one of the challenges is, well, I'm at university. How do I know what it's going to mean for my potential industries to be professional? One of the great ways is to join your professional associations as a student while you're studying. Now, not all of them, but certainly some of them basically make it free for students to be able to join them. And of course, once you get a job, you've got to become a paid member, but they have some versions of free memberships for students. So maybe check that out. And you can, at the moment, you don't have to be just one professional association. If you're not 100% sure which direction your career is going to be in, it's okay to have 3 or 4 that you might become a member of at the moment. And through their newsletters and magazines and chat forums and events that they host, you'll get to build your network, get to actually start to connect with people currently working that industry, and they'll be able to teach you what it means to be a professional specific to that industry. What are the behavioral rules, if you like, that are around being professional for that industry? And also those other materials are going to give you some pretty great insights as well. So I really encourage you to consider doing that as over time. So it's about, finding out the standards for your own club, for example. Your own clubs are in particular professions. So what does it mean to be professional for your club? You could think about that. What does it mean from a club perspective if someone got injured? No matter what your club is and what your functions are, how are we prepared and able to be professional, despite the fact we're all volunteers, to make sure that, gosh, if something happened at an event we're hosting and someone got hurt, we're actually going to treat them in an appropriate way. Okay. And at one stage, there was a Australian Rules Football Club associated with Monsieur Caulfield, and I was the senior coach when I was 27 years of age. And one of our players got a broken neck in the game. And despite being an amateur football club, we weren't professional, but we wanted to be as professional at an amateur club as we could. And the way that we were able to manage that injury when it occurred, through all of those of us that were volunteers at the time, meant that Jason Barry, he's happy for me to share his name, became thankfully an incomplete quadriplegic, and he can actually walk. So despite spending a very long time in hospital, the way that we initially treated that injury and the professional nature of what we did actually gave him some chance of walking, which he eventually was able to do about a year after the accident, which of course he's extremely grateful for, despite still having some significant disabilities as a result of such a tragic injury. So teamwork. So this is about working and collaborating with people to achieve desired outcomes. But I'm also going to get you to think about your definition of team. Often we would think it's just the people in the committee that we're working with to create something, to create the whole year's experience, for example, or a specific event. But what if we expanded the definition of teamwork to actually mean the collaboration we have to do with people outside of our club to enable things to happen? So it could be the caterer. So for a short period of time, the caterer is part of your team. And having that broader mindset about what it means to be a team will blow the mind of your prospective employers if you can explain what you mean by that. And it means, well, we can't deliver. So a simple definition is, no matter who it is, if you need people that's not you to contribute to you delivering something, then they're part of the team, at least for part of the time. So what that means is that our teams are constantly changing shape. We might have this core team, which you might be your committee. It might even be a subcommittee. Within your committee, we've got this core team that's doing the most of the grunt work, but then we have to collaborate with other people, some of whom are not even within the boundaries of your organization, but for their contribution to the outcome we're trying to achieve is we've got to treat them like a teamwork. So we would treat potentially a caterer who's a supplier like a team member. It's a different mindset completely about how we would work with other people to achieve the desired outcomes, because that's what it's all about. In your case, it's about your club member experience. It's about making sure the events, it's about making a difference at university in such a powerful way. Now, you might not know this, but we know through more than 110 years of research within the student affairs industry, of which you are a part as being a member of a committee, that we know that you save lives. And I can say that as an absolute fact. You save lives through what you do. And you do that by building connection for people that might otherwise be lonely. You give people friendships that last a lifetime. You give them people that they can have a shoulder to cry on when they need it because of the activities and the passion that you bring to your club. You'll never know specifically who those people are, unless on the rarest of occasion they come and tell you, and it can happen. They can tell you how you saved them, right? But please understand that the teamwork you do within your committee and with the people outside to create the wonderful things you do. And this is why I'm here. This is why when Monsu Corfield approached me to be able to come and provide this series of work with you, I'm so passionate about what you do and want to help you realize just how important it is, and what you do matters so much. That's why I'm here. And your teamwork skills and everything else we've spoken about so far ought to give you some employment benefits. And when you understand this, they absolutely do. Okay. We've got too many examples over time to know that that's an accurate thing to say. So you also want to make sure that in your core team that members are clear about what they're trying to achieve collectively and what their role in contributing to that outcome is. So role clarity is really important. We're going to spend a whole session on helping get that really specific understanding for your core team members down the track. It's about understanding how to use your strengths and diversity across your team to be able to improve over time what the club does and also create those successes, and celebrating and recognizing the contribution of team members. And, you know, we really want to be able to appreciate what each team member is bringing to the team in what they do, including, again, those external people. So we would, while we might be paying the caterer for what we do, we can still appreciate them as well. Okay. And again, that might be a really powerful story to tell. The ninth employability skill is around tools and technology. So this is everything from whiteboards to artificial intelligence that you might be using. So things as simple as Siri, for example, is a form of artificial intelligence, just like Alexa is. And maybe there's a way that you're using them in a meeting to answer a question you couldn't get the answer from so quickly. It was even quicker than Googling the question. You just ask Siri or Alexa to give you an answer as an example. And it's about normally being able to quickly learn a new technology such as a Miro board. Now, so we've got our 9 employability skills. That's one thing to know what they are. It's one thing to then have your stories, which I've been encouraging you to think about as we go through the big 9 employability skills. But you've got to be able to tell your stories. And there's fundamentally 3 storytelling techniques that predominantly from a medium size to the really large corporate organizations that you might be considering working for. The people recruiting you, the recruiters, the people working in talent or people in culture areas or organization development that might be part of the process to recruit you, are looking for you to be able to use one or of these storytelling techniques to convey your understanding and application of these big 9 employability skills. So the first one's called STAR, which is where you talk about a situation. So it might be the club event, or it could be the academic group you were working in. It could be your part-time job or full-time job if you've got one right now. So that's what situation stands for. The task is usually what the team is trying to achieve specifically. So this is the situation. What was the team trying to achieve? The actions is where you get to sell yourself. So if you're not normally comfortable selling yourself, this is gold, because you don't have to sell yourself. You just got to follow this structure. What was the situation? What was the task that the team was trying to do? What did you do is the actions. That's where you now talk about you. Just follow these rules. Actions means talk about what you did specifically, and R is the results, or as I like to call it, the so what of the story. This is the bit that it's the kicker in the story that makes it matter. The second structure is called CAR, so circumstances, actions, and results. All circumstances really is situation and task rolled into one. Really, it's still star, to be brutally honest, but some clever person at some point in time said, oh, why don't we call it circumstances? So that's called the CAR technique. And the third one is called the PAR technique. So that's problems, actions, results. So that's a great one that you can use for any form of that problem identification and solution skill that we spoke about earlier, right from the small ones through to the bigger, larger problems that you might be trying to solve. So remember, you don't need to sell yourself. Again, I know many of you watching this session will be the sort of people that are very concerned about having to sell yourself. Don't worry about it. Just follow these rules and you will be fine. You'll actually sell yourself without having to try. And that's the beauty of these storytelling techniques. Now, I just want to check if there's any questions from any of you. No, we're looking cool, but feel free to pop them in at any time. What I'd encourage you to do is to prepare one story for each of the big 9 employability skills. So you want to be able to have for each of the 9 of them a single story that you've developed for them that again can come from your time on the club, a part-time job. It could come from your studies. It could even come from travel. It could come from a previous job that you've had, a previous time in your life. If you've got a really good story that seems to be ageless, that's okay. Continue to use it until you get a better one. Now, what you will find is that just by spending 5 minutes, so for example, I'd encourage you to just think about one of the big 9 employability skills for the moment. Just think about one of them. Just think about one of the big 9 employability skills. So that, I'm just going to take you back so you can see them. Just quickly go through them again. So we've got communication, we've got creativity and innovation, we've got initiative and enterprise, intercultural competence, we've got planning and organization, problem solve, identification and solution, we've got professionalism, we've got teamwork, and finally, we've got use of tools and technology. So it's the ability to be able to tell a story from any one of these 3 storytelling techniques. And if you were to pick just one and pick a story, again, just spend about 5 minutes in dot point form writing out the various elements. So the situation, a couple of dot points, the task, a dot point or 2. What were the actions you took? Maybe 3 or 4 dot points that really highlight what you did and what were the results. That might only be 1 dot point, it might be more. And all of a sudden you've got a story. Now let's say you created a story about communication. Now we've got the other 8 employability skills as well. What you can do is you can leverage that one story by saying, okay, I've written out 9 unique stories for each of the big 9 employability skills. But when I go back to the first one on communication, gosh, there's another 8 employability skills, but maybe I could tell that communication story from the perspective of 5 of them. And then you get to your intercultural competence one and you go, gosh, I could tell that story from actually 4 other perspectives of the other employability skills. You get to problem solving, gosh, I could tell that 8 other ways. And you might find that there's an average of let's say 6. There's 6 different ways you could tell each and every one of those 9 employability skills. And this is where the kicker comes in. If you've got 9 unique stories and you can tell them 6 different ways each, all of a sudden, how many stories do you have, folks? 9 times 6. How many stories is that? I know you weren't thinking you were going to do some maths here. That's right, 54. You got 54 versions of stories that are authentic, true, and real about you, okay? And you'll be amazed, all it took was about 5 minutes worth of effort for each of those stories in the first place. And then a little bit more effort again afterwards to think about, well, what are some other ways I could tell this story? Because what you do is you've got that communication story prepared. You're in the interview and they ask you a story about teamwork. Now, you've also got a teamwork story prepared, but it turns out based on the conversation in the interview that actually that communication story told from a teamwork perspective would be better answer for this question that I've received in the interview. Now, because you've got 54 stories you can draw on, and it's a lot easier than it sounds because they're your stories. It's amazing how easy you can do this so long as you've done this little thought experiment before you go for your interviews, that your confidence level when it gets to talking about your behavioral skills, which for most of you, for your first jobs, is going to be the majority of the interview. That's why they're called behavioral interviewing. Okay, if you're not sure of that, that's why that exists. And they focus on these big 9 employability skills and your ability to demonstrate you understand them and that you put them into practice. And this is where the real investment in your time in your club and society comes back to you, because it gives you so many various opportunities to have so many different stories. Over time, what you do is you just replace the stories with better ones if you get better ones. That's as simple as that, okay? Now, your confidence level can go from being low into an interview to very high if you do this work, right? So it's about really thinking through the employability skills, coming up with those stories. Now, again, there's 3 versions of the storytelling that you can use. You don't have to come up with a story for each version. Just pick one of those versions for that specific employability skill. Because again, all I'm saying is you just need 9 stories to start with. Make sure those 9 stories are unique, right? They are different to each other, and have some variability in your life. So not all just from your club or society. I think that will provide you with some really good ones. But equally, if you've got a part-time job or you've had a full-time job before, then if there's some good ones there, use them, okay? But then think about how else could I tell this story from the other 8 available employability skills. If you do that work, the benefit you will get in the interview stage of using these skills is going to go through the roof. And this doesn't stop with your first job. This is something I encourage you to consider to keep doing throughout your careers. Okay, any questions? Let me just check. Again, feel free to unmute or to use the chat function. Looks like we're cool. Okay, so it gets that multiplying effect. So the next session is tomorrow evening, the 21st of April, 2022. It's from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. So Thursday, the 21st of April. Don't know where that 7 comes from there. We might just quickly fix that. There we go. Problem solving and problem identification and solution. I'd like to say I deliberately set that up, but I didn't. I just noticed that then, so I fixed that up. And again, it's not 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. It is 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. That's where that was meant to be. Again, I'd like to say that I can claim that, but there we go, folks. So Thursday, the 21st of April, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And Kieran has sent out the link for that. It's called How to Use Creative Tension to Drive Success at All Levels of Your Club's Activities. I'm going to teach you a little simple model that you can apply to everything you do at your club, but you can equally apply to everything you're doing, including your academic studies. And if you're one of those people that does need to sort of improve your grades a bit throughout the last part of your academic experience, this tool is going to help, and I'll give you concrete examples to demonstrate that. Sessions 3 to 8, there's some dates that are yet to be confirmed. So we're interested in your feedback about the best timing. Is it best to do them during semester? We've got these 2 during the semester break, or is it better to sort of fill them into the mid-year break as best as we possibly can? So session 3 is developing high quality conversation skills and how to use them for the benefit of your club and in fact the rest of your life. How to establish role clarity that I mentioned earlier. Number 5 is discover the power of constructive self-talk and how to foster it amongst your committee members. This is fantastic for being able to build confidence, this tool, and understanding how this works. It's extremely, extremely powerful once you get this, that it really does open up so many doors for you to be able to do things that you didn't think you could do. How being a committee member enhances your career prospects. So we're going to delve even further into looking at how you can leverage that. We're going to look at how to use LinkedIn for the benefit of yourself and your club for session 7. And session 8 is feedback, how to receive it, give it, and why you should be collecting it. Once again, I'm Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. You've got my contact details there. I'm more than happy for you to connect on LinkedIn. So while we are going to have that session down the track, more than happy for you to reach out and connect. You don't have to follow me. Send me a connection request. Let me know that you're part of this series, and I will accept your connection request for sure. And I'm going to teach you how it can be an extremely powerful tool for you at this stage of your careers. I'd like to thank you for coming along and participating. I'm going to, once we stop the recording, I'll share the presentation with you, and I look forward to working with you next time.